The mud clung to her like it had a memory of her, thick and red as blood, and warm from the summer rain that hadn't let up for hours. Eudora Mayfield knelt in it, soaked through her faded calico dress, the hem torn, her knees raw, her belly, round and trembling, pressing against the ground like it had nowhere left to go. She didn't cry out. Not anymore. Her throat was dry from yesterday's begging and the day before's. She cried now only because her body remembered how. She wasn't supposed to be alive, much less expectant, 80 years old, and bearing life where death had taken so much. The townsfolk had called it witchery, devil's work, the vengeance of some old sin. They said she should have died like the Bible's Sarah, quiet and barren, not returned like a ghost in bloom. A boy passed by, no more than 10, and tossed a clump of manure toward her skirt. His mother tugged him away, not in shame, but with urgency, as if Eudora's touch might pass on something unspeakable. Behind them, shutters closed one by one. No one asked why she was there. They'd stopped asking long ago. A slanted wooden sign had been hammered into the hitch post beside her. No charity for sinners. Her fingers, cracked and swollen, tried to adjust the blanket she had wrapped around her belly. It had come undone in the downpour. The wind pulled it from her hands. She didn't chase it. Her feet were bare. She had sold the shoes last week for bread that turned out to be mold. The baker's wife gave her a bruised apple out of guilt, then crossed herself 3 times, as if that'd keep the curse off her doorstep. Behind the general store, a hound howled. Somewhere farther down, someone laughed. Eudora leaned her head against the post. The baby shifted inside her. A little elbow, perhaps, or a foot. Her body was still trying to believe it. She couldn't name what had happened, or when. Only that after a decade of stillness and silence, something had quickened in her like spring breaking into dry earth. The preacher had called her pregnancy a lie of the flesh. Her own son, Jeremiah, had turned from her at church last week, his jaw tight, his wife weeping theatrically into a handkerchief. "That's not my mother," he'd said. "My mother's buried." He had said it without irony, as if grief could bury what the Lord refused to. Eudora shifted, trying to stand, but the mud wouldn't release her. It sucked at her with a terrible tenderness, like a child not wanting to let go. The skies rolled with more thunder. Her gray braid lay against her spine, heavy and wet, and on the ridge above the town, beneath a crooked cottonwood, stood a man, silent, still, wrapped in a black duster, wide-brimmed at shielding his face. A draft horse beside him, unmoving. Thaddeus Boone. He didn't speak. He never did. Not since his brothers died in the fire 10 years back. He'd been rich before, but grief made him something else, quiet, withdrawn, untouchable. He bought land and built fences no one crossed. Children said he had ghosts in his barn. Wives said he watched too long and spoke too little. But today he watched her. And Eudora, half collapsed against the hitch post, didn't see him. Not yet. Her breath rattled, shallow and uneven. Her body was beyond cold, numb beneath the wet. She whispered a name to herself, not the baby's name, but her own. She had to remind herself she still had one. The sky broke again. A low, slow thunder that rolled like boots down a church aisle. The baby kicked. Eudora flinched, then held still, hand trembling over her belly. The pain was coming sooner now. Braxton Hicks, the midwife, would have said. But no midwife would touch her. Not anymore. She gathered what strength she had left and crawled toward the alley behind the blacksmith's. There was a chicken shed, long abandoned, still half-standing. Maybe there'd be straw, or at least something dry. Each step sank her deeper into the muck. Her hand scraped stone and shattered glass. A nail tore her dress, then her thigh. She didn't stop. She made it. Inside, she collapsed onto the dirt. Her chest heaved, breath ragged, the sound of her suffering muffled beneath the storm. She rolled onto her side, cradled her stomach, and let herself shiver. No one followed her. No one cared to. She was as good as dead to them, if not worse. She was a warning. A lesson. Sometime in the night, the labor pains began. She bit down on the leather strap of her own belt. The metal buckle clenched between her back molars. Her body fought like it remembered how. Sweat mixed with rain. Her breath hissed through clenched teeth. No one heard her scream, because she didn't. She grunted, moaned, whispered, but no scream came. She wouldn't give the town that. The pain was slow, crawling up her spine and down her legs like fire coiling in winter wood. She bled. She wept. She prayed without sound. And when the child came, it came quiet. A girl. Tiny. Warm. Alive. Eudora laughed once. A short, cracked sound. Then she wept, cradling the girl against her chest. "You weren't supposed to come," she whispered. "But neither was I." She named her nothing. Not yet. That would come later. If later came. Sometime near dawn, a sound stirred her awake, a knock without knocking. Just the creak of wood and the scent of pine. She crawled to the door of the shed. Rain still whispered down, softer now. A bundle lay there. A wrapped swaddle of flannel, clean and warm. A small iron kettle. A pouch of oats. A length of twine. A bar of soap. And a sealed envelope. She opened it with wet fingers. Inside, a deed, signed and notarized. Plot number 17 of the North Ridge. Good for a small cabin and 1 mule's worth of pasture. No sender. But beneath the paper, folded once more, was a note written in simple, uneven scrawl. "No woman cries in the mud on my land." She read it twice. Then once more, slower. The baby stirred against her chest. Eudora wrapped her tighter. The mud had dried on her dress now. Her hair stuck to her cheek. But something inside her, a stubborn, flickering thing, stood upright again. She looked out toward the trees. Toward the ridge. It was empty. Or maybe he'd never been there at all. But she'd felt him. Like heat near a fire you can't see. Like breath on a window pane. The wind shifted, carried the scent of cedar. And just for a moment, she could almost believe she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The town forgot her name the way dust forgets footprints after a storm. Not with malice. At least not only that, but with something colder, practiced indifference. They remembered the scandal, remembered the shame, remembered how the rain had carried her sobs through the street. But the name, Eudora Mayfield, they let it fall away like a borrowed hymn they never meant to keep. She stayed in the chicken shed for 6 days. On the 7th, she walked out barefoot, her baby tied to her chest in the flannel that had arrived with the kettle. No one saw her come, but they saw her after, standing beneath the bell tower, where she once led choir, waiting for bread at the corner window of the dry goods store. Mr. Kettle didn't meet her eyes. He dropped a crust into her palm without a word, then slammed the window shut. His daughter peered out after, just long enough to mutter, "A ghost with a cradle." Eudora returned to the shed and dipped the crust in hot water boiled over a fire made from chicken slats and pine cones. The baby suckled at her breast, her lips soft, her breath thin and fragile as cobwebs. She hadn't named her yet. Naming felt too much like daring hope, and hope still felt like sin. A fox sniffed outside the door that night. It didn't come in. Even beasts knew what humans had decided. She didn't belong. By the 2nd week, the gifts began. Always at night. Always without sound. A coil of twine. A clean diaper cloth. Tin buttons. A cracked mirror. A slice of smoked ham wrapped in cotton. She never saw who brought them. But in the folds of the blanket she used to cover the child, she sometimes smelled cedar and smoke. Not the kind from the blacksmith's, but from a hearth untouched by years. She walked further now, into the North Hills, up past the tree line, where the wind grew sharp and the pines thinned into hush. There she found it, plot number 17, marked by 3 stones stacked in the shape of a triangle, a meadow behind it, a creek beside it, and the slow, solemn feel of land that had never been spoken ill over. She sat on a stump and fed the baby. The girl's eyes opened for the first time, pale gray, searching. Eudora kissed her head and whispered, "You are not cursed." "You are not a mistake. You are here." And then, quietly, she called her Mercy, not because it was pretty, but because it was what she'd never been given. She returned each day after, carving out a small patch for planting, laying stones for a foundation, gathering moss for insulation. She didn't expect it to last, but she worked like it would, because the doing of it made her real again. Bone by bone, fingertip by fingertip, the woman who had been erased reassembled herself in labor and silence. Sometimes, when she arrived at plot number 17, things had changed. A rope tied tighter, a crack mended in the log wall, a wooden beam straightened. Once a loaf of sourdough sat waiting, warm as a beating heart. She never saw him, but he had hands too big to belong to any town boy. She had passed him once, years ago. Boone, Thaddeus Boone, the land baron who bought up farms like he was saving them from a fire only he saw coming. Folks said he was half-wolf, half-widower, and all alone. Women crossed streets when he passed. Men nodded but never spoke first. Children whispered stories of him, sleeping beside graves. But Eudora remembered different. She remembered a man at her husband's funeral who stood at the edge of the crowd and wept without moving. She remembered him walking the long road home once with a stray calf in his arms and a bullet in his thigh. She remembered, more than anything, his silence, not empty, but listening. The day she first saw him on the ridge again, Mercy was 6 weeks old. She had gone to fill a pail from the creek and found a horseshoe hanging from the post. Above it, the glint of eyes beneath a hat brim. She didn't speak. Neither did he. He nodded once, then turned his mount back toward the hills. That was enough. Her body was changing again, slower to rise, knees that ached like old fence posts. But her spirit, her soul, had found shape again, in the rhythm of waking, of nursing, of mending, of building. She began to braid her hair each morning. She began to sing lullabies. One day a boy came. He was barefoot, mud on his chin, hat too big for his head. He held a wildflower clutched in one fist, already wilting from his grip. "You the witch?" he asked. Eudora straightened. "I'm a woman. They say you hexed a man. Grew a baby in your sleep." She stared at him a long time. "Do you think that sounds like something a witch would do?" The boy frowned. "I think it sounds lonely." "What's your name?" "Clem Waters. My ma's buried, and my pa drinks lamp oil." She gestured to the stone beside her. "Sit, Mr. Waters." He did. They sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes before he offered the flower. It was crushed. She took it anyway. "They don't like you much," he said. "They don't know me." "That's not why." Eudora looked at Mercy, then at the boy. "Then why?" He chewed his lip. "You didn't die when they thought you would." That night, she wrote in the dirt with a stick, "I am not a sin. I am a beginning." Rain came again 2 days later. Thunder rolled through the canyons. Trees bowed under wind. The town huddled in its silence, and Eudora curled around Mercy in the shed, whispering songs from before the world forgot how to be kind. When morning came, she stepped outside and found that a windbreak had been built overnight from logs and tarpaulin, sturdy, high enough to block wind, secured with fresh rope. A bundle of dried sage was tied at its top post. She stared at it, touched it, then turned her face to the sky. It didn't rain that day. Not on her. But in town, the fire started. It began at the pulpit. Inez Crowley, preacher's wife, had been asked to lead the Sunday women's circle while Reverend Walton fell ill. Her voice, tight as piano wire, rang through the pews. "I saw her child," she declared. "Eyes gray as smoke, hair black as night. And what does Scripture say? That in the end days, wombs will bear strange fruit." A murmur rippled. "She walks barefoot like Eve. Lives on cursed land. What man helped her, I ask?" Thaddeus Boone's name wasn't spoken, but it lingered. She didn't go to the midwife. She didn't go to God. What kind of mother is that? When she left the pulpit, no one challenged her. By week's end, Eudora found a dead sparrow nailed to her shed door. She buried it quietly. That night, as Mercy nursed and the fire crackled, she looked out toward the North Hills. No light, no horse, nothing. She missed his silence more than she should have. The next morning, Clem arrived with a bruised apple and said, "Folks are stirring up torches." Eudora didn't flinch. They forget light burns both ways. He nodded like he understood. But he was just a boy, and boys still believe justice looked like lightning. She kissed Mercy's head and whispered, "They don't get to name us. Not anymore." That evening, she lit her own fire, stacked it high with sage and pine, let the smoke rise like a prayer. And from the ridge, as the moon cracked silver across the valley, she saw a flicker of movement. A horse, a man, watching, still, like he never left. It began with a cough, soft as candle smoke, rising from Mercy's throat in the dark. Eudora felt it before she heard it. The child's chest rose too slow, her breath warm but thin, and the touch of her skin felt fevered, flushed. The night had been cold and still, stars like frost on a black pane, but Mercy burned against her like a coal. Eudora didn't panic. She rocked, hummed, dripped spoonfuls of willow bark water onto the baby's tongue. But by morning, her daughter's lids fluttered too slow, and her cries turned hoarse. There was no other choice. She wrapped Mercy in a shawl, tied her close to her chest, and walked through the town's center like a living sin. Her feet left muddy streaks along the churchyard path. Eyes followed her from behind curtains. Some didn't bother hiding, just stood in their doorways, arms crossed, mouths bent. They'd grown used to her, but they had not softened. She reached the doctor's home near the well. Knocked, waited, knocked again. The door cracked open. Dr. Bramer stood there, silver spectacles, gloves still damp from his morning rounds. "She's burning up," Eudora said. Her voice was steady, but she swayed faintly on her heels. He looked at the child, looked at Eudora. Something passed behind his eyes, conflict, perhaps, or fear of his wife's tongue. Then he stepped back. "I can't," he said. "I'm sorry. She's an infant." His eyes flicked left. "It's not safe. For me. My practice." "She's dying," Eudora said, louder this time. He closed the door. Eudora stood there a moment longer. A breeze lifted the shawl at her shoulder. The baby whimpered, then coughed. She turned. Behind her, children watched. One spat. Another whispered, "Devil baby." Eudora walked to the general store. It was closed. The bakery, too. At the church steps, Inez Crowley stood, arms folded tight across her chest, eyes gleaming with the righteousness of a dry well. Her voice cut the square like a whip. "You think you can bring death to our doorstep, and we'll just kneel to it," she hissed. "What you carry's not of God." Eudora didn't stop. "She's a child. She's a warning." Inez raised her chin. "Look at her eyes, gray as gunmetal, black hair like night sin. 80 years old, and you want us to believe the Lord did this." Eudora kept walking. Behind her, the whispering turned to muttering, then to laughter, then to quiet. She reached the edge of town, Mercy shivering against her, her skin slick with sweat. She hadn't cried in weeks, but she cried now. Not because she was ashamed, but because she was empty. Because she'd spent everything she had left, and still it wasn't enough. Because she'd been left outside the door with the child she'd carried alone, and the only sound she had left was the wind. And then there came a hoofbeat. Slow, deliberate, like it had always meant to come, but waited for the right silence. Thaddeus Boone. He didn't dismount. Just stopped beside her, raincoat folded back, hat low. "Child sick," he said. Eudora didn't answer. "I know." She looked up at him. They wouldn't help her. "I know," he said again. He reached into his coat and drew out a folded document, laid it on the saddle horn. A land deed sealed in blue wax. "Whole North Ridge," he said. 20 acres. Irrigated. Livestock access. Timber rights. She stared. I'm trading it, he said. For what? He tilted his head toward town. For your child's care. She blinked once. That's too much. No, he said. It isn't. Before she could protest, he turned his horse and rode back. Into town. Straight to the clinic. Tied the reins, dismounted, and walked in like he'd been summoned by blood. He laid the deed on Dr. Bramer's desk without a word. The doctor swallowed hard, looked at the seal, then nodded. Bring her in. Boone returned, carried Mercy himself, held her like something made of glass and honey. Eudora followed, trembling. Inside the back room, the doctor bathed the child's head in vinegar water, drew out a vial of elder syrup, dosed her gently. She's stronger than she looks, he murmured. But you brought her just in time. Eudora pressed her forehead to the table. Not in prayer, in exhaustion. When she looked up, Boone had stepped back, watching. You didn't have to do this, she said. I did. She studied his face then, creased, sun-dark, eyes that had forgotten how to ask. Not pity, not charity, something else. What do you see when you look at her? Eudora asked. Boone's eyes dropped to the child, who had just begun to breathe easier. My mother, he said. She died young, but not before teaching me what mercy looks like. The words hung there. No one touched them. By evening, the fever broke. The doctor offered them a cot. Eudora slept with Mercy on her chest, dreamless for the first time in years. Boone stayed at the door until dawn. When she awoke, he was gone. But the town had changed. They didn't yell. They didn't confront. They whispered. He sold a ridge for her. He watches that baby like it's gold. He's bewitched. Or worse. Inez Crowley spoke to anyone who'd listen. That child's not right. I've seen things. Dreams. Shadows over the barn where she sleeps. It's a sign. Children passed the shed and drew chalk crosses in the dirt. Someone nailed a chicken's foot to her garden fence. Mercy giggled when the wind blew through the window. She'd begun to teeth. Eudora didn't stop working. She planted rosemary, dug a root cellar, took the dry moss from under the shed eaves, and made it into mattress stuffing. And Boone came back, always at dusk, sometimes with nails, sometimes with wood, sometimes just a silent nod. They didn't speak much, but each evening, something built between them, not like fire, but like stone, slow, permanent, patient. One night, she caught him smoothing the child's blanket. She looks like you, he said. No, Eudora whispered. She looks like someone who got a second chance. She won't remember any of this. Good, Eudora said. But I will. They sat on the steps of the unfinished cabin. Stars opened wide above them. The town lay dark in the distance. Why me? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, because you stood up. She waited, and because no one else would. He turned then, eyes meeting hers in the half-light. I don't know what they see. Devil. Witch. Shame. He reached out, touched her wrist. But I see a woman who refused to die when they buried her. His hand stayed there, warm and still. Eudora closed her eyes. I don't need saving, she said. I know. She opened her eyes again. But I wouldn't mind company. The child stirred between them, and in the hills above, thunder rumbled, not a threat, but a reminder that something was coming, something soon. They gathered in the square with torches, not for warmth, but for spectacle. Not a mob, not yet. Just enough firelight to let hatred feel holy. Inez Crowley stood at the center, hands clasped, mouth shaped into righteousness, eyes glittering like wet stone. She didn't shout. She spoke softly, like a woman delivering truth to children, and that made it worse. The child, she said, was born of wickedness. The townsfolk nodded, not because they believed her, but because belief had always been less important than belonging. She walks barefoot through God's land, whispers to the wind, and we pretend she is one of us. A murmur, a cough, a flicker of doubt. She brought him back, Inez hissed, eyes rising toward the north ridge. Boone. A man who buried his brothers and buried himself. She drew him out like a wolf to moonlight. What kind of woman does that? At that, there was silence. The kind that stirs right before a whip cracks. They came to her fence at dusk. 5 men. 3 women. 1 child wide-eyed. They didn't touch the gate. Just stood staring. Eudora met them from the porch. Mercy was asleep inside, the fire low, the air thick with cedar smoke and milk. She did not flinch. "We don't want trouble," said the butcher's wife, adjusting her shawl. "But we want clarity." Eudora tilted her head. "Clarity? On what you are?" Eudora stepped down slow. Her hands were bare. Her hair was unbraided. "I'm a mother," she said, "and a woman, and I plant rosemary by my porch." The blacksmith cleared his throat. "You walk under stars when decent folk sleep." "I walk when Mercy cries. You don't come to church." "She's teething." Inez stepped forward then, emerging from the shadows like a sermon turned storm. "You brought that man down to us. You cast a spell, and now we're meant to bow to your miracle." Eudora didn't speak. "We're asking you to leave," Inez said. "By dawn." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some glanced away. A few stared at their feet. And then came the sound. Boots. Measured. Heavy. Thaddeus Boone walked into the light like he'd been born from the dark behind it. No coat. No rifle. Just his height, his presence, and the silence that followed him like weather. He didn't speak at first. He walked up beside Eudora and faced the crowd. Then he laid a slip of paper on the porch rail. It was a marriage license. Signed. Filed. Dated. The crowd stilled. "I claimed her," Boone said, without asking. A gasp. A breath caught in someone's throat. "I didn't do it for you. Or for your comfort. I did it because she is mine. Because this land, this house, that child, all of it. She made it live again." He turned to Eudora. His voice softened like dusk falling. "I gave her my name. She never asked. But I gave it anyway. And I won't take it back." Eudora looked at him, slow and long, like someone measuring distance before a leap. Then she turned to the crowd. "I didn't want a man," she said. "I didn't ask for a husband. But I've carried weight too long alone." She reached out, touched Boone's sleeve. "And it's a kind thing," she added, "to be chosen when the world has already named you unworthy." Inez stepped forward again, sputtering. "You defy God." "God was there," Eudora said, quiet but firm. "When I bled, when I begged, when no one else came. He didn't ask your permission." The preacher arrived late, winded, robes wet with sweat. He saw the scene, torches, crowd, Boone, the paper. And then he did the only thing he could. He read the license. Out loud. The words echoed. "By the laws of this territory, joined in name, with witness." No one moved. Boone stepped down. "I'll not ask again," he said. "You leave this fence. And you don't return." And one by one, they obeyed. The child turned in her sleep. The fire hissed low. Later, after the torches had disappeared down the trail, Eudora sat beside the cradle. "I didn't say yes," she said, without turning. Boone stood in the doorway. "I know. You gave me your name." "I did. It's a powerful thing. A name." He stepped closer. "So is Mercy." She looked up then. He knelt slow beside her. "I'll sleep on the porch," he said, "until you say otherwise." The moon caught in the window pane, soft and silver. "Boone." "Yes. If I asked you to build a swing on the hill, just one, for her future, would you?" "I already started." She smiled. "The first true one in years. I guess that means I said yes after all." Outside, the trees swayed gently. No torches. No threats. Just wind. And the long hush of something sacred. Mercy stirred and giggled in her sleep. And on the table, beside the kettle, a single ring sat in a dish, rough-forged, not yet worn, waiting.